Kids, this is Ivan. How you doing? I'm going to do another bass guitar video or basic guitar equipment video. I've talked about these things in the past, but I wanted to give you my real world experience with using the Mesa D800 and D800 Plus for, gosh, it's got to be like close to 3 years now. And, you know, I gig a lot, so I wanted to give you my actual experience with these things. I'm not affiliated with Mesa, but if you're considering buying these things, you never actually use them or heard them, I wanted to give you like the skinny. And I'm not going to play through them because you can find a million videos on YouTube of people playing through these things and all that kind of crap. I just wanted to give you my report, how these things are. The D800 is a fantastic little amplifier. You know, both of them are really fantastic. They're both really light, like all D-class amps are. This one is obviously lighter. The form factor is a bit smaller. Sometimes I like to use this one because I can put something on the side, like a tuner, on the top of my amp, and the other one is just a little bit wider, so you know the form factor of this is a little bit neater. I wish I had a bright switch. They both have deep switches. The bright switch is really kind of neat to just kind of, you know, it gives you this instant sparkle. That's my basic complaint with this amp, but I understand just, you know, how much can you actually put in here. And I know that the little guy actually is a bright switch and not a deep switch. The mid controls are just dialed in exactly right. You know, very often I'd rather bring this one and use it because it's just plug and play. And yeah, there's times when I want to dial in a real specific frequency. Most of the time, the high mid and the low mid on this thing get it. The high mid can sound kind of annoying by itself, but like when you're playing and you're like, gosh, I can't hear the bass, sometimes what you need to do is just goose the high mids just a little bit. Oh, there it is. Of course, sometimes you can take the voicing control because it tends to sound neat. It starts right about there, you know? But then you're scooping mids a little bit, and it does more than just scoop mids. It moves stuff around. You have to experiment with it. It's very useful. You can use the whole range of this thing. And just really based, you know, for me, in my experience, on like how mid-heavy or how mid-scooped your bass is and what the room is like. But the voicing control is pretty, you know, nifty. You know, you can usually get, oop, there it is, and I kind of tweak something if I really, really need to. Generally, that's the only control I tend to use, unless I really have, you know, something else I need to do with the amp. The little guy right here doesn't have as many plugins in back. So it doesn't have an effect send and return, which can only be a bummer sometimes if you're using an external preamp, especially if you're switching between them, which I have done before using like whatever preamp, an Alembic or an Arkham or a Demeter or something like that, and switching between that and the internal preamp of the D800 Plus and using like a, you know, some splitter in front and using the mute switches, and that's getting too complex. But I've done that, and then, you know, the gain is pretty close. The auxiliary return or auxiliary input on this thing is not as hot, so you have to turn up the, you know, the amp gain a little bit more if you're doing that, or you have to turn up the gain of the external preamp more to get it to be as loud. So that's something to be aware of. You know, not too many cases though that I bring a couple preamps. So generally, the connectivity on this thing is fine. You know. Let's see, what else could I say about these things? You know, line level, mic level, you know, every once in a while I've had a guy that wants to get a line level signal out of this thing, so I can do that. It's the DIs sound great. I've always had sound men say, yeah, these things sound really super, no problem. The ground lift is, you know, pretty simple. If you hear a buzz, boom, easy. And then the pre and post EQ can get pretty interesting. Like when I done recording or whatever, or just I've decided, you know, I wanted to put my post EQ signal into the PA, you know, gives you all kinds of connectivity options. You probably heard about that before. But I can say in real actual use, you know, real world use, it's great. You have all this, you know, these options right there. The auxiliary input I use all the time to practice because I've got a little connector and doohickey that I can plug into my iPhone, you know, plug into this, and then I'm playing music through my bass amp, and I can, you know, jam along with it or learn songs. I learn songs all the time using this when I'm not, you know, Bluetoothing to my stereo system or something like that. So got to buy a couple extra cables. You can find them on Amazon for like almost nothing. No big deal. And so really, really useful. The headphone jack is really, really useful. I barely use it, but it is awesome. You know, but like if people are sleeping, then I can use that. This little guy is also great because it's small, like it's not wide, and I like to use this thing very often because I can put like a tuner on my amp and it fits a little bit better on the top of my speaker using this guy. Also, the mid controls are just dialed in just right. I know that something like low mid is 200 or so, and you know, high mid is like 430 or something. Don't quote me on that. You know, they did double blind tests because normally we would think of high mids being higher, but man, they're right there. And very often I find like, man, I can't hear the bass just well enough, and I just use the high mid and boom, there it is. I just get it just a little bit. Sometimes it doesn't sound good on its own, but that little bit can cut. Very often though, I find that the voicing control, sometimes I can just turn it all the way down, which is nominally flat, and oh, there the mids are. And then you can mess around with this. It's easy to kind of get the voicing, where you've got a scoop sound, or gee, that sounds really exciting, but then you're at a gig and you have to tweak it a little bit. And this voicing control, in my experience, sounds good right about there or so. Don't, once again, you experiment with your bass, but it depends on the basses, because I have basses that are a little bit mid scoop, like this guy right over here. I have basses that are a little bit mid heavy, like that guy over there. Can you imagine a Music Man being mid heavy? So I can mess with the voicing control really easily and instantly, get the sound that I want or like or what have you. One of the reasons I kept these amps over the other Mesa amps that I had was I could just dial in a sound really, really fast. I wish that the little guy had a bright switch. Did I say that already? This guy has a bright switch. The really little one, which I do not have, the 350, that has a bright switch. That's really gives you some extra sparkle and stuff like that. And it's hard to duplicate exactly on the little guy, but you can do it. You can tweak up the presence a little bit, or not the presence, the highs. Just not quite the same. This amp is also voiced a little bit brighter in general. So if you like that, you might like this one a little bit better. Which one do I use more often? It depends. And I failed to mention with these suckers, by the way, that the auxiliary input, I've used that and brought these things as extra power amps to gigs where I'm doing sound, and say I want to use both channels of my mixer, my powered mixer, to just run the mains and give them as much as possible, or use several speakers. And so I use these for the monitors. I send like a monitor send to one of these amplifiers and just use it as a power amp. And it works great, where I've run like subs, like passive subs off one of these things. And it's tiny. Really, really useful amplifiers. So, my real world experience with these guys has been they're phenomenal, they're great, they're extremely reliable. If you want the extra control to be able to dial in the precise mid area that you want to, this thing is cool. Although very often I tend to set it where the little guy is, and that sounds the best. But this does give a little more fine tuning, but I hardly ever use it, honestly. And this amp, generally what I'm using is the bright switch and the contour, and maybe sometimes a little bit of bass boost, and that's about it. Occasionally I mess with the variable high pass filter if I have some speakers that it's clear that they tighten up a little bit better, and I'm not beating that crap out of them for frequencies they can't really do. But these are really rock solid amplifiers. They just sound good, and they're extremely easy to use. The controls, the EQ controls, are just, they work. They do it. And the Mesa's customer service is wonderful. So I'm not affiliated with them in any way, but I can tell you that my experience with these guys has been that they sound good, they're incredibly reliable, and they're just incredibly useful. And I use them a lot. They're loud as heck, and they're 2 ohm stable, which is very important to me, because I like to use a lot of 8 ohm cabs, so I can bring a bunch if I really want to, or 3 of them. And sometimes I bring a 212 and a 15, so that's, what is that, 2.67? Yeah, so I can use just one head, and it's great. So, which one is for you? I don't know. I've got both, which I think is a good idea. If you want a little bit more flexibility, want to use external preamps an awful lot, that sort of thing. What is the same thing? Anything else? Got a foot switch head? No, yeah, it's pretty much aux input, tuner output. Same basic stuff. Yeah, this has a tuner output as well. The little one does not. I think you can't go wrong with either one of these things. So, yeah, did that help you? I don't know, but my real world experience with these things has been that they are real solid workhorses, and not just plain Jane workhorses. They sound good.